they say just start writing, right? And put, if you have an idea, just put it out on LinkedIn or Substack or something like that. Sort of keep it raw and, don't worry about over editing too much, post it and move on. Try not to worry too much about reaction or engagement. So I've been trying to embrace that kind of thing. I don't think you can go wrong with honest writing. It's good to show the real you, which I always appreciate when I see from other people. Just, you can sort of tell when someone's got a little bit of a facade or not. And from a marketing perspective, it demonstrates how you can break down information and ideas and, resonate with other people.
Today on The Flame, I'm joined by Kris Klein, a copywriter, creative director, and content strategist with a love for storytelling and creating his best work under the thorniest of challenges. Kris brings over 20 years of experience navigating the creative industry and has been reflecting on his own journey after a recent layoff. I'm excited to dive into his story and learn all he has to share about staying creative and resilient. Let's get started. Good morning, Kris. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks, Bob. Happy to be here.
Great. Haven't done a podcast in a few months, so just kind of shaking the rust off here. But for new viewers or new listeners, Kris and I have been connected a few years on LinkedIn, kind of traveling in some of the same circles. But I recently saw an article that Kris had posted kind of announcing his layoff. I loved it. It caught my attention first because you mentioned Halloween, which is, right up my alley. But also it was, kind of a lot of the perfect analogies for why I started this podcast. Kris, for those who don't know Kris, I'd love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, talk about who you are, talk about your experience a little bit, and then we'll get into it.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Bob, and good on you for creating this forum. Thank you for creating a podcast like this where we can talk about this stuff. And the episodes thus far have been awesome. Like I told you last week when we finally connected in real life. So apologies if I'm lowering the bar today, but my name is Kris Klein. I am a copywriter by trade. Most recently worked as a creative director at a small boutique agency. I also have some content strategy background. Spent the first half of my career on the in-house marketing client side, but always writing, and started freelance copywriting in earnest in 2012. And I've always had that sort of freelance business going, even as I held other positions. And then moved over to the agency side in 2021 full time with an agency. Started working expanding my wheelhouse as a creative director until being laid off at the end of April last month. So that's where we are today. That's where we find ourselves.
So, what's up?
Never a dull moment.
No, it never is. And now you're kind of starting to try to learn new things, right? Or kind of figure things out. Is that something that, as a writer, it seems like, it's easy for you to just be able to write. You don't have to sit down. Not that I'm trying to say it's easy, but like, as opposed to, design, having to sit and create something with, visuals and do a lot of that stuff. Whereas you could literally just sit with a, pencil and paper and just write. And there's a lot of outlets for writing. What are some of the things that you're doing to kind of keep kind of the wheels greased a little bit?
Yeah. Like you said, I'm lucky in that, writing is it's always been sort of therapeutic for me, right? Like, when something's going on, it's always been easier for me to write something down, just start writing about it than really to talk about it out loud. It helps me navigate feelings and make sense of things and put things in perspective. So, when things get, you hit pivotal moments or things get, you hit hit a challenge, like that's naturally, I know that's like a safe place for me to go to work it out. So that's what and that's what I heard from, after over 20 years, you can create a network of peers. A lot of them, copywriters have been through this, and they say just start writing, right? And put, if you have an idea, just put it out on LinkedIn or Substack or something like that. Sort of keep it raw, and don't worry about over editing too much. Post it and move on. Try not to worry too much about reaction or engagement. So I've been trying to embrace that kind of thing. I don't think you can go wrong with honest writing. It's good to show the real you, which I always appreciate when I see from other people. Just, you can sort of tell when someone's got a little bit of a facade or not. And from a marketing perspective, it demonstrates how you can break down information and ideas and resonate with other people.
Right. And that, like I said, in kind of the setup here, that article that you wrote on LinkedIn certainly got my attention, because I felt like it kind of really nicely compared the fear of being unemployed to a child's fear of mummies. And so, that article, the great mummy, is kind of, what I would title it. So when you sat down to kind of write that article, I mean, first, it's hard to be opening up and vulnerable, especially when you're in a state of like, what am I going to do now? But so how do you feel like reframing that fear helped you navigate this next phase of your career?
Yeah. So the mummy thing is from my daughter, Ada, who's almost 4, loves Halloween, loves monsters. But for whatever reason, got freaked out by the mummy thing. And, I don't know. I guess the parallel is that fear isn't always rational or straightforward. It can be this sort of abstract thing. We don't know why we're scared. A lot of times, even admitting that we're scared is the scariest part. So you can avoid thinking about it and that stuff, but you can't avoid mummies for the rest of your life, and it just gives them more power when you're trying to like avoid stuff. So. That's kind of how unemployment felt for me. It was like intellectually, I get it, and I've seen it, I've experienced it, but not not on an individual personal level. So it was like, I get that it's going to show up. I think virtually everyone's going to go through it at some point in their life in some form or fashion. Like that's gonna. I get that it's going to show up at your door or on your screen uninvited one day, but I wasn't truly prepared for that shock, because you just don't know until it happens to you, really, I think.
Right. Is that the first time you've been kind of laid off? Have you had the ability to kind of jump from job to job?
I haven't jumped a ton. It's not the first time I've been laid off. The first time was very early in my career, but it was a different life. It was a different guy. I got it back then. It was like I didn't have a lot of security in or maturity in terms of like as a skilled professional in my field. Like I think I deluded myself that I was immune to the economic pressures that out there.
Right.
As a creative director with copy and content strategy experience. Like I considered myself a rare breed and fairly secure, to be honest. So I think I fell prey to that subjective bias a little bit, like it can't happen to me.
Right. And I think that happens to all of us, where you think that, you're at a certain level in your career, that you're almost invaluable, and things are going well until they're not. Right. And then you kind of have to, you have to, it's almost worse when you're, the table stakes are a little higher, right? Because maybe when you felt unemployment before, you didn't have kids, or your kids were young, and,
Exactly.
it's a different feeling now that you're like, all right, now what do I got to do? And
it
it hurts.
A whole different set of feelings for sure.
Right. And it's hard to, at the level, when you're managing people, or when you've been established in your career, it's almost hard to want to admit that you're actually unemployed. You're like, how is this possible? Right. And so why do you think it's hard for creative professionals to even admit that they're unemployed? Like, how can we shift the mindset to something a little bit more empowering?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think probably because I can speak for myself, like creativity is big part of my identity. Um, I'm a big therapy guy, and like that. But my least favorite question when you go to therapy is like, what do you like about yourself? What are like three qualities you like about yourself? I always hated that one, but the one layup I always had was like, I'm creative. Like,
Right.
kind of. The other ones were kind of bullshit, but creative was like I could hang my hat on. Like, I do like that about myself. I take pride in that. Um, so you lose your job as a creative leader. Shit. Maybe my creativity isn't as special as I thought. You know, I think it's natural to question yourself. It's a phase in the process. Don't stay there too long, but feel those feelings. And, like I said, I find it inspiring when someone's vulnerable enough to share how they're really feeling, without fear or shame holding them back too much. Like, yeah, I'm sad. Maybe I feel like a loser. That kind of honesty is empowering. We can all relate to the human condition. So shout out to therapy.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I did, because it's, you're right. When you are put in that situation, you're kind of like doubting your creativity, like going back forever. You're, like just
Right.
that one moment, and it had nothing to do with, whether, the ads you created or the stuff that you did was good or bad. It could just be, it's a money decision, but you're always kind of trying to read between the lines there. Right. And so, um, it kind of puts your whole identity in question, right? And so, can you speak to like how creativity is tied to your identity? I know it was a big thing for me. It kind of put me in a funk for at least a few months until I kind of like worked myself out of it. But have you, and maybe it's still a little new for you, right? But have you felt like that there was a strong tie to your identity and you as a creative person and you outside of your career?
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of hard questions without a ton of answers, in the early stages of unemployment, I found. And, the crickets get loud. And yeah, you do sort of think back on your whole history. You and I have been doing this for a long time, obviously, to think that we're not, you know, creative experts really, is there an irrational, thought. But when we're talking when I'm talking to myself, those negative voices can overpower, rational thinking. So, that's why I think it's been really important for me not to isolate and to get out there and talk to people and to do things, and to think about other people, and what they're going through, shared experiences and stuff like that. Um, and I'm just responsible for the effort. And up front it's like, oh boy, I got to get my portfolio back together, which all these things to like busy yourself. Should I get a website? And then once that's all done, it's like, all right, now I gotta start talking to people. And I sort of maybe procrastinated and hung out on the fun portfolio website stuff, maybe a little too long. But there's no like linear process for this type of thing, or blueprint. I think I had to feel what I was feeling. I had to work through these like stages of, it's a grieving process really.
Mm-hmm.
And like, anger was a real stage in that. I hung out in there for I reveled in that a little bit. Like, I had this like chip on my shoulder, like, I'll show you what a mistake this is, and watch me go get something better, by next week. And that's the ego attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good look. It's a good thing I wasn't talking to too many people when I was feeling like that. And it humbles us pretty quick. We come back down to earth. But in the beginning, my pride was really hurt for sure. You don't have the title, the salary. You're not solving problems with your peers every day. You're not helping, feel that purpose. And that's not, you know, and then there's the monetary, you know, livelihood piece of it, where every time I looked at my daughter, I would almost start tearing up. You know, I'd
Yeah.
feel guilty. So that's really, you know, like I said, it's a process.
Yeah. I think what helps, you know, at least for me personally, as a creative, is to try to, you know, at first you want nothing to do with what you've just done because you're feeling so kind of awful about yourself, your situation, even if it's irrational. But then finding something to feel like you've got control of something, and maybe leaning into kind of going back and self-reflection. It's like, all right, I know, you know, this has nothing to, this doesn't reflect on me as a creative or how good I am at my profession. And so I'm just going to go back and lean into the things that I know. Right. And so your craft of writing, how has that helped you, like played in helping you cope with that uncertainty and moving forward? Did you feel like you didn't want to pick up a pen, or you didn't want to write within the first few weeks, and now you're, you know, I saw the article, I saw you on Substack, like starting to kind of allow
Yeah.
yourself to get back into it and lean into your creativity?
Yeah, I leaned right in. I'm writing more than ever. Like I said, that's traditionally what I've done during challenging times.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, and like I said, there's that therapeutic part of it, and then there's that creative part of it. Maybe, you know, there's a little bit. My head's a little too noisy to be sort of getting too immersed in a new story, or some sort of fiction or anything like a big concept. But just the act of writing, and you know, there are like some simple prompts that I do regularly that might be, you know, you don't have to be a writer to do them, but and they might be a little like lame and cheesy, but you know, like starting like writing a gratitude list every day and things I'm grateful for, why I'm grateful for them. The job used to be a regular on there, but I still don't have any trouble finding stuff to appreciate, and like an act like that shift things a little. You know, like what's the worst that can happen is another prompt, just like going down the rabbit hole of worst case scenarios. And usually that can get sort of silly and satirical when you realize that fear is can be like a wolf in sheep's clothing. There's a bunch of ways like writing can helps me stop feeling stuck. And you can always ask Chat GPT for an idea. You know, it isn't a substitute for a professional therapist, but
Right, right.
suggestions are
Even if
fine.
it's just to generate some ideas for you to get going.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
I've
as
I've maybe
a
talked to mine a little too much.
I think everybody
Yeah.
does right now. Um, you know, are you doing any other, like any quick exercises that as a writer, or, you know, as a creative, that you could, you know, give to somebody for, um, you know, staying creative within your writing? Do you have any practices that you like to do, like warm ups or something like that?
Um, like I said, the gratitude list I do in the morning. There are a bunch of different prompts, and in my notes phone, I've got a sort of a running list of things that I want to explore, and that can sort of help you map out just as topics for you know, social media or whatever. You know, you turn me on to Substack. I've found that's a real gem of a site, and you know, I love the content I've been reading on there, and I'd like to start getting more, because there's some of the ideas are pretty random, and they're not necessarily marketing, thought leadership, or anything like that. So a place to just like put your weird creative stuff that um, you know, that's not sending it to your mom, who's probably doesn't want to read that stuff anymore. Hi, mom.
Mom always wants to read your stuff.
We'll get you set up on another podcast app, mom.
Yeah.
I know my mom does.
Yeah, it's cool. It's kind of like, you know, it's a way to get away from all of the that thought leadership and, you know, nonsense that comes up on Twitter or LinkedIn, and just kind of work on your craft. You see more people trying to work on their writing craft, as well as sell you 10 ways to enhance your Substack. You know, you see a lot of that. It's like everywhere you go, but it's still kind of a new source, I think, for writers and creatives, and there's different ways to use it.
Yeah.
But I do see a
What
lot.
have you learned in your journey? And you talk to a lot of experts. I know you've talked to a lot of creative coaches and stuff like that. And what are some of the insights and suggestions that you've found worked well for you?
What I've learned is just to just to act. The longer you sit there, you can come up with, sit down and try to come up with 20 ideas every day, no matter what they are. Just sit with, in a calm space, grab your pencil or your pen and piece of paper, and just get those ideas out. It's almost like doing your thumbnail sketches when you're trying to come up with a website layout or something like that, right? Or design for a poster. You sit down and, or at least you're taught to sit down and get everything out of your head before you get into the programs, because then you kind of get bogged down. But if you can get those ideas out, however small or insignificant they are, it could be an idea for a t-shirt design, or the name of a rock band, or
Yeah.
starting a podcast, like those ideas. And it was just to kind of act on that, and not let any inhibitions or any self-doubts creep in based on the experience you've just had, is to find some control in that way and just kind of lean into your creativity. And then, for me, I felt awful. And I knew there was a lot of people, around me that I had seen, that I knew, that were laid off, especially, it kind of started 2020, right? When COVID hit, was the first time I really had to experience laying people off myself.
Yeah.
Getting on the phone with HR and telling them their life is about to change, right? For no reason other than, cost savings, right? And that was awful. And I felt, the first time I had to do that, I literally had to like shut my computer down and go for a walk around the block to clear my thoughts.
Yeah.
And so, I had been a long time since I was laid off, and rediscovering those feelings about what I went through. And then also thinking about all the other people that may have been laid off around me at the same time, because you just kept seeing people, creatives, losing their jobs left and right. And so my thought was, I have no idea where I want to go or what I want to do, but I felt like I had a clean slate. And so my goal was to try to help myself through helping people. And so, I think you kind of talked about that in your article a little bit, and kind of helping others in times of struggle. So have you, are you working on doing that or leaning into that at all? Like, how has supporting others helped you kind of rediscover purpose? Or maybe you're not that far along yet.
No, yeah. I mean, like I said, losing the structure and the social component of work and people you spoke to every day, and we're on the front lines with, can leave you feeling leave me feeling, keeping to me pretty lonely sometimes. And we're less alone than we think. The communities that are available to us, um, like this podcast, and just where social media is, it wasn't like this just a couple years ago. Certainly not a decade ago when I was last unemployed. Um, and I find we tend to be at our the best comes out of people during tough times, and our society doesn't always play nicely together, but there's a spirit of kindness that comes out when it comes to people's livelihood. That's beautiful to see. So and it goes both ways, right? Like I try to check in on people, and the same people that were laid off when I was laid off. How are they doing? Do you need a recommendation? So sort of taking time, carving some time out for checking in on other people, um, gets you out of yourself, and then it. There's a sort of an economy of empathy with us, the unemployed ranks. I found, and more specifically on with creative professionals that are listen, like there's a lot of awesome things about being in the creative field, and job security is not one of those awesome things, and it never really has. And that's okay, But yeah, some days it can be a trudge, and I think it helps to think of somebody else, and on those days when things are coming hard, and shooting them a note, and just getting in that practice of, if someone, reach out when someone comes to my mind, like, shoot that, like, how you doing? It's all, don't overthink it. Overthinking, that inner critic, like, you can talk yourself out of a lot of stuff. So getting in the
Right.
practice of doing these things. If a thought, thoughts trigger an action, and like you said, it's action is really important right now. You can get paralyzed.
Right. Have you, I think one of the first things you think of when you're laid off is to kind of, hit up your network and stuff. So have you been doing that? And do you feel like you've been kind of feeling that support and from kind of different areas, whether it's family, friends, former colleagues, or connections? Has that helped you?
Yeah, I mean, it's hit or miss, right? Like, people are people. It can be a little awkward for some people, even people close to me. They don't know what to say. But in most cases, I found less is more, and I really appreciate the thought that comes behind a simple text or something that just says, "Hey, thinking about you." I don't think anyone. I'm not looking for a dramatic pep talk from anyone. Uh, you know, and I get that they could feel bad, whatever it is. I still think it's best to err on the side of saying something instead of, like I said, the crickets are loud already. And or just flip it, and, like, if you were found on the unemployed side, what would you want done? Would you want to hear from your friends and family, and what would you want to hear? What would be helpful?
Yeah, I think you always want to know that, you've got somebody out there that's, thinking about you. As cheesy as it sounds, like, I still like seeing all the happy birthday posts on Facebook, even if they have no
Yeah,
idea when my birthday is and they just are saying it because Facebook
sure.
told them to say it, right? It's still kind of like, um, in a way, it's like a, guilty pleasure, right? It still feels good to think that, people are looking at your stories or, giving you a thumbs up on your articles and things like that. And you
Yeah,
feel like that there's that level of appreciation, um, even if there's people that you don't, talk to all the time.
yeah. And like I said,
Um,
it's that staged process, and, like, I wasn't, like, laughing a lot in those early days, and even, that's sort of its own communications currency of memes or jokes or whatever. And I'm glad I'm at a stage a month into this thing where, there's some levity in the process. I can even laugh at the situation. It's cliche, but it's like a blip on the radar. Um, and they often turn out to be net positives. I have to be jolted into change sometimes.
so what are you learning about, so far early on in the kind of your unemployment, your employment search about, you know, I think when we talked before, you thought, yeah, I could probably have a job next week. And I feel like I felt that way too, because the first time I got laid off, I had a job almost a week later. But I
Mhm.
think it was, kind of serendipitous and it worked out. It just was the right timing. And sometimes that happens. And other times, you apply to jobs and you don't hear anything back. And so,
Mhm.
um, kind of what can you share with people who may be in the same situation thinking like, oh, this guy's an accomplished creative director. Of course, somebody's going to snatch you up really quickly. Is there anything you can share about that experience so far and how you're
Mm.
dealing with that?
Yeah, I guess it would be, to try not to attach yourself to rigidly to a specific outcome. Like, yeah, getting a job, a better job, a higher paying job, like, you know, those are feel like the motivation early on. When all you could do is first of all, I guess I didn't realize how rough the market was right now. And I definitely had some hubris, if I'm saying that word right. And he was definitely humbled right away. Like, okay, I thought I'd be a little bit more in demand, um, but I was attaching myself to an outcome, and if I didn't get a job, a better job, a higher paying job right away, then the failure was just gonna heighten. Um, So each day I'm just like responsible for doing like the effort and not the outcome. Just all I can do is do what I do, and what's going to happen is what's going to happen. But it's not going to be on my time. Um, and yeah, I think that expect that kind of messiness. It's not linear. It's not probably not going to go the way that you you hoped or maybe envisioned. But just keep chopping wood and carrying water, I think they say.
So you have any hobbies that are keeping you busy? Do you find like now you're allowing yourself to kind of, focus a little bit on that? I don't know if you
Yeah.
if you get to the gym, go for a run, do some home projects. Like, what are you doing to
Yeah, I'm not
keep
getting to the gym as
keep
much.
your mind active?
Yeah, certainly a lot of walking. I've got my daughter and the family all close by, so being able to spend more time and just be totally focused on them has been great. But yeah, I think a daily routine, establishing a daily routine, which I've always tried to have one, and it's been important for me, just to get my head right in the morning, to at least try to do the same thing every morning. But it became really important in unemployment. So incorporate some physical activity, and community. Connect with people. Make sure that's a critical part of the day, because the whole day can go by and I'm like, I didn't talk to anyone. That's probably not good. Um, but like I said, go for a run, hop in a pickup basketball game. Hopefully you don't blow your knee out. So I try to just be open to different experiences. That starts with taking a walk. If I feel like stopping here or doing that,
Mm-hmm.
just getting out and walking has been great.
Have you thought about what you want to do next in terms of a career? Are you,
Have I thought
because
about
now you're like, all right, for a clean piece of paper, right? You
it? Yeah.
can kind of start over and really think about like, do I really want to, because I found that in the beginning I was just applying to everything just so that I
Mhm.
could, get my resume out there. But then I'm like, do I really want to work for these companies? Is that
Yeah.
really, worth the time and effort to do that? Or do you want to focus in on, a handful of um, agencies or clients that I want to have, and kind of target your search that way? What are you feeling?
I think I'm still sorting that out. Obviously, having the freedom to do your own thing is awesome, but that comes with a lot of daunting challenges. And having a family, there's always that concern of stability. And same with the agency side. Agency can be a fun place to work, a really challenging and gratifying place to work, but there's a lot of volatility that can things can turn on a dime pretty quickly. So there's the pros and cons of each one. I do have experience working on the client side and in-house marketing leadership side. That has pluses and minuses with it as well. So no, I don't have a clear vision of, but yeah, I like to try to be open to everything that comes through and at least have a conversation about it. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I
Do you
think I
have
know
any,
what I don't want more than what I do want.
what you don't want, right?
Yeah.
It's probably easier. It's easier to define what you are kind of negatively averse to.
Yeah.
Um, but talking about things that you do like, have there been some projects or just business sectors that you enjoy writing for the most?
Um, you know, my bread and butter has always been like financial services, healthcare, B2B stuff. I still think there's a huge opportunity in B2B to do things a little less safe. And, I feel like we kick around a lot of cool stuff on the B2B side, but when it comes, there's a lot of committee reviews. And by the time it hits the market, it looks the same as the next guy. Um,
Right.
so, creating that, and that's the challenge of this. It's not just in creating like concepts and ideas and all that. It's selling them and getting organizations to have the courage to like stand behind something. That it was a new thing as a creative director that has been a learning curve. So I think, like I said, I'm excited about the opportunities in B2B to do more B2C type cool stuff. Um, but I think that the challenge there is getting the organizational buy-in and convincing them to take risks, because they're feeling it economically themselves. Marketing is the turnover and pressure on them is 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 huge, and a lot of times they're just fighting for their jobs and fighting to please the CEO, which doesn't always result in moving the needle the way that they probably could.
Right. Yeah, you said at the beginning you came from boutique, but then you've also worked for some larger organizations. Do you think that there's your approach changes? I know you just mentioned you got to kind of sell that work, and there's different stakeholders. Do you prefer working in a smaller boutique outfit versus something that's larger, more corporate?
Yeah, yeah. I'd rather be the one that's executing on the brief than writing the brief. Although writing the brief is sort of a lost art form that I've talked about on LinkedIn last week as well. But so that there is, I don't think one's more important than the other,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a little more exciting to be on the take this objective and this insight and turn nothing into something. It's pretty, you know, uh, pretty fun thing to do. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. I think there's challenges in both, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned what honestly what it comes down to for me is the creative brief. And I don't know if it's, in your experience, you find that nobody really can get the creative brief right, no matter um, what type of company or sector that you're working in, whether it's healthcare, finance, B2B, like it just seems like that's where the beginning and ending of where projects can, accelerate or take off or fall
Yeah.
apart. And so, I'd like to, are there good examples of, or, tips that you can give for, writing or coming up with a good creative brief?
Well, I'd say check out my LinkedIn post last week, because just generally less is more. And the more you can distill it down into one key insight, just the bare bones of what we're trying to do. I think they turn into like book reports sometimes, and it's fine to have background information in the appendix and stuff like that, but the brief should be brief, should be a page, and really just getting down to what we want to achieve and what is like the key nugget that we're trying to illustrate or convey. I think that kind of like rigorous structure like lends itself to more freedom, creative freedom. And some of these longer, more exhaustive briefs, it's like if you're trying to be everything, you're going to end up being nothing. So that's typically, like I said, it's one of those things that like there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Maybe it's not taken as seriously, it's hastily done, or it's, you can't get the strategic answers that you need for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's again part of the art and the science of marketing, is asking the right questions and challenging when the client's being vague. Um, that's again like just like the organizational buy-in, like that's huge. That can make or break a creative project.
Right. Coming back to the article that you wrote, where you kind of made the analogy of the mummy and using a fictional character to kind of help get your point across. And it made me wonder if you actually had ever done any fictional writing or storytelling, you know, on your own, because we kind of, in our careers, you get so into like other people telling you what they want you to write or what they need you to say. And then there's not that creative outlet where you can just kind of, be fun and write something. And I bring it up because I have a good friend that was a copywriter I worked with for a number of years. And now she's getting into, children's storybooks and
Cool.
that kind of stuff. Have you ever thought about going that way?
Yeah, I mean that was the vision early on, and I took my shot at script writing and short story writing, and man, it's hard. And it's you gotta sort of trudge through a lot of bad writing to get good. So I was really young when I did more of that, and the inner critic was pretty loud and was like, I don't think this is like a career path for you. But it's still fun. It's still something I do on and off. Places like Substack, like might be a forum where some fiction work might be able to go.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then children's books. I mean, I read a ton of children's books these days, and yeah, there's some great writers that are doing those, and that there's definitely an appeal to that kind of thing. But one of the positives of being at an agency around really creative people that were doing all sorts of different things across media, like we had a little bit of a sharing community of who's working on side projects and stuff like that. I
Right.
enjoyed that at the agency. It's more encouraged. Yeah.
Right. So you have a fondness for working with other people as opposed to, I could see some writers wanting to like, go stay at a hotel by themselves and write. Nobody just, nobody
Yeah.
bother me. I'm writing, I'm crafting things. You kind of feel like you feed off of that community.
Honestly, it's counterintuitive for me, but I know I recognize how good it is for me, and I've certainly been a lone wolf earlier in my career,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty well resigned to staying in the background and just give me writing projects, and I'll churn them out. But I wasn't great collaborating. I wasn't great speaking, but it's like anything else. It's like you want to keep growing, and the only way to do that is to like do it, do the thing. And I'll probably never, it'll never come naturally. I'm not an extrovert, but I do it now, and there are huge benefits to it, obviously.
Yeah. So I guess for my last question, and I know it's still kind of early for you as it's been just only a couple weeks now, if that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm sure it feels like it was both a really long month and also a very short month. But you're probably learning a lot about, what you want to do, kind of who you are, where your career's going. So is there, if you can kind of go back and give yourself advice from a month ago to now, is there something that you would tell yourself about, having the resilience and creativity and kind of staying true to who you are, even with those self-doubts happening?
Yeah. It was entering the unknown, right? And I know myself, and I know my natural response to the unknown, and like it can be paralysis and flight over fight, and then that action that we talked about. So getting ready, and I'm fortunate enough that I think I did that better than I expected. But getting right into action, um, you know, move a muscle, change a thought, because it's a dangerous place to sit in, I think. And So move a muscle, change a thought, whether it's something creative, something physical. Don't give that inner critic time to start talking shit. Just go. Um, and another, be wary of isolation. If I'm talking to myself, like things can just go south really quick, and
Mm-hmm.
I can convince myself that I'm like psychologically safest when I'm alone, but it's just the opposite, really.
Right.
I could beat up on myself pretty good
Right. Well, I'm happy you came on and you shared with me and kind of opened up. And for anybody else out there that's listening, there there's people out there that you can connect with, and definitely don't sit there and beat yourself up. Get out there and connect with people. And I really appreciate that you took the time to hop on here and kind of share your story and share some insights from other creatives. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate you. Good on you for setting this whole thing up.
Thanks, Kris. Thanks to Kris Klein for being a guest on today's show. And thank you for joining me on the Flame podcast. There's definitely more to come. Please take a moment to follow, subscribe, or hit the like button if you haven't done so already. And if you have any feedback or would like to be a guest on the show, send me a message at talk@theflamepod.com. I would love to hear from you.